All right. Hello. Welcome back to another podcast. This is the Aquarium Insider Podcast with your host. My name is Dan Connor. And I just wanted to give a little update. We have been out of commission for a few weeks. We've had an enormous amount of growth happening here on our farm and our retail location, physical and our online sales. And we're honestly just trying to ramp up and work through some issues. And on top of that, I've recorded 3 podcasts so far that were supposed to be released, and I had some technical difficulties. I'm not really sure how in one of them I left out, like the audio wasn't turned on. Not sure how I do it with this mic. It's relatively foolproof. And then in another one, the last 2, I wasn't sure what happened, but the audio was incredibly staticky. So I think I've come to a realization in my life that technology is starting to surpass me. So I got to check it out a little bit deeper before I do things. And so I worked through those issues. So I'm working on getting those recorded and having on some cool guests coming soon. So I've got a couple lined up. So excited for that. So today I wanted to do a little bit different podcast. I don't know what to call it, but one thing I can think of is like story times. I don't really talk a lot about our sort of my background and what it is, but I wanted to give you a little insight into what it's like into being a fish farmer. So from, an industry perspective into how we dealt with fish on a daily basis. And I'll take you through so for those of you who don't know, this is my background. So I grew up on a fish farm, right? We used to breed fish. We bred mostly angelfish. And then to tell you stories about how we ended up having to develop a new line of fish because of what happened to us when I was a kid. So we're going to talk about that. And then I'll talk about what it's like to own a fish distribution company as well, because that's also part of my growing up and being in the business, and then how I kind of got started into this. So let's kind of just take a little memory trip down. As a kid, I grew up on a 20-acre angelfish fish farm when I was a kid. So I'm 35, right? So this is like early 90s when I really started remembering things, like 5, 6 years old, something like that. So we had a 20-acre farm, with most of our angels going into earthen ponds, like big ponds in the ground. And we had 2 buildings where we would have, my God, we must have had 500 pairs of angels at any given time. And it was just massive amount of angelfish growing up as a kid. Right. Stuff I take for granted, not knowing. A lot of people are like, my gosh, you grew up in this. This is like my dream, what I wanted to do. And I've always grown up with it. So I don't know any different. This is all I've ever known. So when I was little, I was always on the farm helping out. We'd pick fish. We'd sort through sizes of angels, types of angels. We'd go ponds. We'd seine them up. So essentially what we do is we would try to get up all the angelfish in a certain time frame. And everything else we had to cover and just basically kind of hold out for winter. So what we would do is we would try to hatch out some of the babies, right? And we'd hatch them out. And once they were free swimming and eating really, really well, and they've got up to maybe a little below dime size inside of our buildings we had on the property, we basically had concrete burial vaults, but they were actually built-in concrete vats. They weren't actual separate burial vaults. They were all just concrete vats that we poured. We'd basically get them up to like dime size, and about dime size, a little bit bigger. We would then put out 5,000 to 10,000 angels per pond. So depending on what pond we were putting, excuse me, we'd end up putting about 10,000 angels per pond. I was still real little as a kid when I was doing this. So about 10,000 angels roughly per pond. Right? Sometimes maybe 15 if we're trying to get some in there. Try to get them big enough to sell essentially as quickly as we can. We want to sell them and rotate over inventory. So we trying to sell them at probably a quarter size, right? That was a good size for us to sell at the time to the larger, distributors and or wholesalers, I guess, at the time to them. So we were just the first, we are the people producing it. We would sell it to a wholesaler who then sells it to a distribution company who then sells it to a pet store who then sells it to you, right? That's essentially how it would work. So back then, and it's just like this in most agriculture products. If you don't know, most farmers make the least amount of money. I don't know what it compares with on a fish farm. amount. I know in normal agriculture, typical farmers make less than 10, 3-4 cents on a dollar that's produced for agriculture products. I don't know if it's actually matching up as close, but I know it's not much. So when I was about, I think I was about 8 or 9, we had a problem on our farm. And I don't know how to explain this, but essentially we had a virus. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of we did get a lot of help from our local extension office on try to find out what's going on, but the technology was so limited back then. There was like one electron microscope in the entire state of Florida to figure out what's going on. So we were having angelfish problems not only within our farm, like in our buildings, but we were losing them in the ponds as well. We're talking a farm with probably anywhere between, at any given time, 500,000 to 1 million angels at any given time. And we would lose fish in the building. We started losing fish in the ponds, and we couldn't even get help fast enough. It was trying to look back at the time frame, and I'm a kid. I asked my dad some time frames, and he said in roughly about 14 days, in 2 weeks, our entire livelihood was wiped out. Every angelfish on our farm was dead, which is, that's a lot to take in, because you got to think about it, being in this perspective, like this is our livelihood. This is how we make money, by raising angels to sell to people to keep in their tanks. We have to have enough per year. We try to make enough money to put food on the table. It's not a glorious, production business like I think some people might think it is, but it's a hard business, and especially at the farm level, right? But so now, and by the way, angelfish was like 90% of our production. 90%. And then there's nothing we can do. We never really even got a good conclusive answer as to what happened, other than it was airborne. I believe, only thing and at the time I asked my dad a lot about this because I was still real little. I was like 9, 10 years old, something like that, when we had it happen. And it was, it's devastating, right? You only have 10% of your crop left to sell off. And we were doing, at that time, plecos. We were doing some African cichlids, some of the babunas. We were doing some checkerboard barbs. And this is stuff I can remember. And I believe velvet and pineapple swordtails at the time. So we didn't have a lot of left to even breed or raise up and actually make money off of. But one thing that came out of this is we were like, it was a weird scenario. So you got to think about it. We have an entire 2 buildings dedicated to angelfish production. Plus we did have, our other fish in there if we were breeding them inside. The swordtails we bred out in the ponds. Essentially, we got the breeders, we put them in the pond with them, stock it up for like 9 months, and then we start harvesting some boxes out of them, 1,000 a week, 2,000 a week, whatever it is. We could take any of those other fish that weren't angels. We could take barbs, we could take the Africans, we could take the swordtails. We could take, and we tried it with swordtails first. We put the swordtails in the same tank as some of our angels. And the angels are dying off left and right. And the swordtails aren't even flinching. They're not having any issues, like any issues at all. So again, knowledge, right, and technology was incredibly hard to come by back in the day. So, and I, back in the day, I didn't understand it. I was a kid. Like, I didn't know, at the time, it never resonated how hard life was about to get and how difficult it was going to be to deal with such a huge loss. And I credit my dad for going through some of the most adverse times. So we had to make a quick change up. How do you make a change up when you're a fish breeder and your entire 90% of your livelihood is basically dead? And there's nothing you can do, right? So let me just recap essentially what happened. So our farm died. The farm down the road from us took a huge hit and lost everything. And with no super confirmation, but it seemed to be some sort of airborne virus that came in through possibly an imported product. I don't know if it was the same fish. I don't know. But it was never conclusive, but it seems the most likely some type of viral issue because most viruses are species specific, and it didn't affect anything else on our farm. By the time, we didn't really know how viruses worked, right? And we'll talk about why this was bad for us to start with. So let's move on to how we're good. I'll come back to this. So, all right. So we have an entire farm where we've been breeding fish, and 90% of our livelihood has just basically disappeared off the face of the earth in less than 2 weeks. So you can't pivot fast enough to bring in brood stock of any kind or breeders of any fish and think you're going to turn away and start making money, because that investment has to be in the brood stock. Luckily, back then it was, and just like it is now in the rural commercial side, it's very tight knit. If you needed something, you probably could get some help. And it was a good group of people to be around. They were helpful. Everyone was helpful amongst each other. It was nice, just from my interactions with the farmers that I knew as a kid. So it's a small group of people, and still to this day, it's a small group of people. So we had to find some other way to put food on the table. So one way to supplement, our money until we could get our breeders back online was collecting hog chokers or freshwater flounders. So I used to go with my dad all the time. And for me as a kid, it was just fun. I didn't know any, again, I'm young. I'm not really understanding the gravity of our situation. But we would go and catch freshwater flounders out of the rivers, and we would collect them and sell those to distributors. And that's how we were able to make it by and put food on our table to survive until we could get our brood stock up and breeding again. And when I say breeding again, we did it a little bit differently this time. We still decided to go with angels, but we were going to diversify out so it wasn't as heavy into angels. So now this is probably, I believe, like a year and a half later. I had to piece all this together, ask my dad to help lay out the timeline for all of this and go through how this actually worked. And so now we're a year and a half down the road, producing angels again. No big deal. Everything seems to be going well. No issues. And then out of the blue, out of nowhere, the whole thing hits us for the second time. So now we've set up all these angels again, and now we've diversified out a lot more. We're doing a lot more cichlid production. We're doing a lot more barbs production. We're doing a lot more live bear production in the ponds, right? Because they didn't have no issues and they sell just as well. Very easy to deal with. So we started doing that, but we started moving back in angels and setting those back up, and they're producing, and everything's going well again, and it's going good. And then boom, out of nowhere, the angelfish thing hits again. And in literally another short time span, we lose all the angels for a second time. And it was the last time we ever raised angels commercially until we put in a farm on a new property. And, I don't know how we could have got it twice, other than maybe there was the only thing that would make sense to me on how we could have got it again is we had some angels that were still in the pond from the last time everything died that didn't die, right? They did not die from the virus, and they were able to survive and somehow passed it on to the next generation of frying the ponds. I'm not sure. Even to this day, I'm not sure, because again, technology was limited and it's a hard thing to deal with. I mean, fortunate for us, it was not, I think it was like half our production at that time. So it wasn't as big a hit. Still had to supplement our incomes, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And we were able to get past that and move on. And it taught me a lot about it, kind of living through this adversity, right? And as a kid, I didn't know as much. And I look back, I reflect, and I'm like, man, I'm incredibly appreciative of like the work ethic my dad has for that kind of stuff. Cause I don't know many people who could have gone through that and make it and then still stay in the same business. Like, that's some huge losses. And my dad loves fish. This has been his passion for his entire life. He quit his big job to go work on a fish farm. He was working at one of the essentially fertilizer plants, I believe. He was doing one of those, working there, mixing fertilizers for the big companies. And he quit that because he couldn't do it anymore. And fish farming was fun. It was new. It keeps you in really good shape because we were doing almost all of our fish were breeding or we're raising them outdoors on big piece of property. So I don't know. I just I had fun talking about this, talking about our background, give a little insight into like what it looks like to be a farmer and some of the struggles farmers go through. And by the way, this is just our struggle. Maybe I'll try to get some of the farmers out there to talk about what things they've gone through. And this is just one piece of a very big puzzle. And I just want to make you guys aware these things happen. It's not, we're not, no one's perfect. Things happen, but we do the best we can with what we have. And that's all we can do. So I hope this made sense. I hope this was a good talk for you. I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next podcast. Take care.